Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a bit of an emergency broadcast to discuss the new buffs, nerfs, and changes released to Infinity Army last night. Along with this, the new ISS has been released. We'll be covering this in a separate video, and for now we'll just be focusing on what else has changed around ISS. Let's take a look. So first up here in Panoceania, we can see that the Jotun and Gunnar have both had their CC weapons changed slightly with PS value. This is a aspect, you're going to notice a lot in this list. It's not something we're necessarily going to cover. I'll mention it once here and then we'll move on, but there's been a slight change to the pass number with CC weapons. Now, the very interesting things happen when you get a little bit further down, starting with Trinitarians getting a new hacker option with a killer hacking device. This new Trinitarian option is 24 points with a boarding shotgun and picks up a killer hacking device. Now, this is a pretty big deal for military orders. In essence, you'd be looking at minimum 30-ish points to get a killer hacker in military orders, and this was really limited to the Knight of Santiago. This being dropped so many points and also starting halfway up the board is a really big deal, and the Trinitarian's quite a good killer hacker with surprise attack on that killer hacking device. Being a hacker as well, it gives you a bonus in a lot of missions for pressing buttons. So this is a pretty big move for military orders. Now, though the Knight of Santiago is good, you're usually taking the drop troop version, who is in the mid to high 30s. This Trinitarian being in the mid 20s is a big difference, and allows you to sort of take a different style of list where, with the Trinitarian and along with the Crusader being in the lower points cost as well, you can start, taking those units to deal with enemy hackers, and then be taking your heavy infantry, where usually you'd have to be building a list entirely around not getting hacked if you wanted to take a significant amount of heavy infantry, or have heavy infantry really be the core of your list. I think the Trinitarian's pretty big. I think it has the potential to open up a new kind of military orders list where you can invest quite heavily in that heavy infantry without having to, take a Deferzen or take a Santiago. I think it's a pretty big move. Regarding who I think's better out of the Trinitarian or the Santiago, I think they're different. They're very different. The Santiago is purely an assassin. He wants to break into that deployment zone, make a lot of trouble, where the Trinitarian is more of a classic, midfield specialist. You may still come into an issue where, the Trinitarian still has to get to the enemy hackers, and that can take a bit of time, but I think it's a lot better than a Santiago FTO. So big ups for the Trinitarian. I think it's a pretty big deal, pretty big move for the faction. It also has decharges and shock mines. The decharges mean, it's quite good at doing classifieds, as it's also a veteran troop. And the shock mines with the boarding shotgun, you can set up a decent fork. They can still do the normal Trinitarian things. Overall, I think this Trinitarian change, it's a really massive change. And I think it's really impactful, and I think it's really good as well. I think this is really pushing military orders along with some of the other changes going to N5 into, maybe one day getting out of C tier. We'll find out. Then the two Jones have picked up the skill number 2, which means if the fireteam leader dies in their fireteam, they become fireteam leader. It's a fine skill. I think it's a lot more useful on regular Joan, or Joan of Arc V2. She's usually going to be your fireteam leader, because she's taking those shots in the active turn. Look, maybe, maybe more in vanilla Pano for Joan of Arc B2, this might be useful, but in military order, she's going to be the main gun. She's not really going to be on ARO either, so I don't really see it getting used an incredible amount. Where regular Joan, she's sort of the secondary gun in the link. Probably you've maybe got a bigger gun in front of her, though I'm not really sure what that gun is in military orders. So she's likely to get more use out of it. Unfortunately, regular Joan is the lesser used of the two. But it's something for free. You take that. Nothing wrong with that. Just not something I think is incredibly impactful. Now to something that's a bit more impactful. Deferson has had his movement updated to 6-2 and added dodge +1. So one thing that's always felt a little with the knights is generally slow movement, or very normal movement where you would otherwise enjoy that 6-2 heavy infantry movement. It's hard to really state the impact of moving 6-2 until you get it on the table, and it's quite a big difference. Deferson has, being a hacker, might do quite a bit of first short skill move and then hack. Getting extra movement out of that's really great. And the dodge +1 inch, it might not really seem like a big deal just on the tin, but I think it makes running him with I think it makes running him with the young Teutonic Knights really good. You've both got units who are both moving 6 for a short skill, and are both dodging longer than they run. Deferson's Fizz 14, which, means it's landing that dodge 70% of the time. But when you're running with the Teutons, you probably don't mind missing the occasional dodge. But yeah, I think this Deferson change is quite good. I think Deferson was probably an S tier model in military orders anyway. And hey, this is just better. Nothing wrong with that. Next up, Mendoza modifying movement to 6-2. Again, I think it's good. It's for free, whatever. But I don't see this changing any of the core issues with Mendoza. Him, I've talked a bit about, forward deploying heavy infantry without a marker state in other videos. The movement bonus is nice, I just don't think it fixes any of the problems with him. So overall, how's Panoceania feeling? Really, really good. The Trinitarians and Deferson, big moves and shakes that are going to do something really positive for military orders specifically. Love it. Alright, next on to Jing. You can see we've had a couple of CC weapon changes. Adds FTO options for the Hulang and Crit Cockram with forward deployment. It's nice. I know Peter, who came second in CanCon, is quite fond of both of these models, so getting extra options for them with forward deployment, I imagine is pretty happy about that. Then the T and Go, a very strange change. Hollow Mask has been stripped from the hacker options, but they've had their cost reduced by 1. This really only affects the forward deploy profiles and the Killer Hacker FTO. Bit of a shame. I think the Killer Hacker FTO with Hollow Mask was really its niche, next to, maybe not as much, but the Jammer as well, which has kept its Hollow Mask, being able to surprise people. I'm not really sure, what the aim of this change is. It's a bit unfortunate with the T&Go Killer Hacker losing the marker state. That was the reason I used to take it. But hey, we move on. So overall, how's Jing feeling? Pretty good. No real huge changes. Ariadna, Willy Wally gets number 2 skill, whatever. Fide and Koom change their pass weapon. Aljabel gets a nanopulsar and something for reinforcements, which no one plays anyway. So yeah, nothing special going on in Haqqislam. Next up, we've got some bigger changes in Nomads. Diablos remove CC attack, SR-2 skill. I think this was more of an oversight in the first place. They have pass 4 CC weapons, and when they had SR-2, that was, pass 2 CC weapons, which I don't really think was intended. I think this was sort of just a vestigial or leftover from a different, time in maybe building the app or building the edition. Diablos, still quite good, and I don't think this really changes much in terms of their usability. There has been a pretty big change with the bandits, though. They've got rid of the booty skill and added infiltration reroll, and they've dropped all profiles points only by 1 point. It's not a big points drop, but points drop is a points drop. What are you going to do? But yeah, the big change here, removing booty. Now, booty was fine. It synergized pretty decently with the +1 burst on the profile if you rolled the right thing. But there were, a relatively high number of pretty dead draws for the bandit, with a number of things on the booty chart already being on the bandit's profile, like adhesive launchers and close combat weapons. And it added infiltration reroll. So and this is really for over-infiltrating. To over-infiltrate, you need to roll a Fizz -3. The bandits have a Fizz 13. So essentially, you get 2 rolls, 2 coin flips to try and get that bandit over the line, which amounts to about a 75% chance of over-infiltrating that bandit, which is actually quite good. The bandit as a profile, really excels at the closer range band. I can see you wanting to do it. I think especially with the mind-laying deployable repeater, being able to get that in a really annoying forward position could be quite valuable. I think it is going to be one of those things where it takes a bit of time to, understand where you can and can't put an over-infiltrated bandit if you haven't played with these kind of units before as a Nomad player or as a Corregidor player. But overall, I would say this is a good change. Even just a little bit of a points reduction, mixing around some skills, even if you don't really end up using that infiltration reroll, which I think you will, mixing around of some skills that were to get a points reduction, that's pretty good. Finally, in the Corregidor Fireteams, added FTO to the Vostok in Fireteams wildcard. So this is another thing you're going to see a bit of in this update, is adding FTO to remotes that have an FTO and a non-FTO. So before the update, in the Fireteams chart, for a wildcard, Corregidor just had Vostok. Didn't say Vostok FTO, now says Vostok. So what this meant was, you could really take either of the Vostoks in a Corregidor Fireteam as a wildcard. I interpreted this initially as, this is something special Corregidor can do. They can take the normal Vostok or the Vostok FTO, where the other Nomad factions must take the Vostok FTO if they want to link it. Great, this is a strength. What I'm thinking now, because there's quite a lot of these style of changes, is that maybe like the Diablos, this was a bit of an oversight when the app or edition was being developed. But yeah, I think it is unfortunate. The regular non-FTO Vostok has a repeater on board, meaning he could white noise, off of himself, or a hacker could white noise off of the Vostok for the Vostok to then engage was, quite a strong tactic. So that's a bit of a shame. So how does Corregidor come out of this? I think the bandit changes are probably inching out the negative of the Vostok nerf. I'll say meh. Alright. Huge list of changes for Combined Army. A lot of them do boil down to weapon changes. The first major one is the Speculo Killer, changing Martial Arts level 2 to level 3, adding a Nano Pulsar, having a template that's really nice, changing from pistol to silenced pistol, which is really nice. I think silenced pistols, they're not something people have really gotten to see the impact of on the table yet, but they look to be quite good and are quite good from the people I've heard from who have used them. And then a points reduction. So, this is a big swing for the Speculo. Maybe you take it instead of a Grief Operator or Malignos now. Not sure. We'll have to see, how good these changes swing, but this looks quite good. Hopefully it helps them out a bit. Now the T-Drone removes BS attack guided as a core skill and added non-FTO options. Cost of FTO reduced from 70 to 15. So this is written in a bit of a weird way, but what it's saying is there is now an FTO and a non-FTO option. The FTO option no longer has guided. The FTO option no longer has guided, where the Fireteam option doesn't get the guided, can't be linked, in to get that extra guided die. So we were seeing at the start of N5 in a few factions, you could link these missile bots to get an extra die on your guided. This bumped up the numbers in reliability quite a bit, and essentially if you wanted to play a guided strategy, they were the go-to factions. So this is changing that a bit, really reducing the amount of linked guided in the game, and the T-Drone is part of that. A big list of models here. Vector, the Void, the Base, and the XO got jet propulsion to their super jump. This is pretty nice. Essentially, the way we've been playing this in my meta, and I know there's a bit of ambiguity around this, bit of differences between the metas. We've been playing regular super jump. You sort of have to go in a straight line. Jet propulsion lets you kind of jump around corners and that sort of thing. Is sort of how we've interpreted these super jump and jet propulsion rules. So this is quite a nice change. Again, it's for free. You're not going up in points. So yeah, quite good. Quite a good change. Ducash, Swick cost and vanilla combined, now 1 instead of 0.5. This is definitely a little hit with the nerf bat. Ducash is probably one of the better parachutist deployment zones. I think there was somebody else making a lot more noise than Ducash in Combined Army regarding, alpha strike and kill potential. But I've had heard some horror stories. Maybe this is something CB wanted to sort of taper before it got to be a bigger deal. But yeah, a definite nerf. Can't say I came across Ducash personally, but the profile is pretty scary. Next up, a really big change for Norkius. Change the killer hacking device to a hacking device with upgrade total control and Trinity. The value of the EMCC weapon is now PS6. Cost options is increased by 2 points, and the hacker option now costs 0.5 Swick instead of 0. So this is a pretty big mouthful of changes, but what does this actually do? Well, the main thing it does is it gets rid of Norkius's marker state. Part of the reason Norkius was so good is that he could cyber mask and then very quickly get into a position where he became unmanageable. And the most common way to get rid of Norkius was to get him before he'd got wounds or before he'd gotten into a marker state. So this is a pretty big deal, and quite a big change to Norkius. Also, sort of adds a 0.5 Swick cost to make at least a little bit of your Swick for taking him. So yeah, this is quite a big change to Norkius. He was really fast, really deadly. There were lots of things they could have messed with to bring Norkius down, like getting rid of super jump, getting rid of immunity arm, maybe even getting rid of Prothean, depending what. But getting rid of the marker state, it's one lever they can pull to try and decrease his power. At the end of the day, a regular hacking device is still pretty nice. He's getting a lot of benefit from that hacking device on, a very high whip hacker, which is quite cool. There's a bit of rumblings now about Victor Messer, who we looked at a little bit above, picking up super jump jet propulsion and still being a killer hacker who can go into a marker state. You might see Vector on the table a little bit more now, and with a more flexible super jump. But it'll be interesting. Norkius definitely hit with the nerf bat a little bit, but from what I'd seen, heard, and played against, definitely deserved it. Alright, on to ALEPH. Smeg remotes, basically the same as the T-drones. It was a guided profile that could get a special die. They've split it into 2 profiles, where now you get an FTO one without guided, and the FTO one has guided. Next up to O12, a bit more exciting. Added the new Tinker profile. We'll take a look at this more towards the end of the video. Available in all O12 profiles. We'll get to what I think about the Tinker a bit later. Nightshade had a pass change, whatever. And then Saladin, removed repeater, added deployable repeater in Mine Layer 2, points cost reduced by 2. I think this is a good change for Saladin. The repeater always felt a bit weird, and adding Mine Layer 2 means you can put 2 out. 2 repeaters to the deployment zone, probably more impactful. I was not really a Saladin enjoyer to begin with. I don't really think this swings me, but I think this is a good change. Overall, O12 is pretty happy. JSA, we've just had some pass values changed. Nothing big there. Then on to NA2. So Varangian Guard and Wolfgang Amadeus both just had, slight weapons changes, nothing special there. And then in Drew's Baram and Akari, they both lost the ability to link the missile bot with guided. This is a bit of a shame. Um, I personally felt like this was a bit of Drew's and Akari's sort of special place to play in, where they could, execute the guided strategy really well in what was otherwise a fairly weak faction. Uh, I think Akari, I mean, they both still have niches to an extent, but I think especially in Drew's, this is a bit of a sad change to see. Um, but yeah, look, if you're playing Drew's or Akari, you're no longer getting that really nice linked missile bots. You've still got probably trending towards some of the best pitchers in the game with the X Visor BS12 pitchers, really only matched by the Cyclone. And that's really where your niche is lying now, just in the initial pitching. I do think this is a little bit on the sad side, but here we are. I think the NA2 factions definitely leaving with a bit of a sour taste. All right, well, let's take a look at the Tinker. So here's the Tinker. We've had it spoiled before, but didn't really get too much traction. It's an 11-point, not engineer, kind of a like the Tech B, has a gizmo kit, but is not an engineer. Deactivator, gizmo kit repeater, specialist operative. Pretty nice line there. Stat wise, BS11, Whip 13, Armor 0, not setting the world on fire. Has a flash pulse and an adhesive launcher, stun pistol, and para CC weapon -3. So this is a bit of a funny one for me. It reminds me quite a bit of the Tech B, without the tag calm. And it's sort of like a flash bot, without the flash and a little bit of little bit of changes here. I think it falls in a really awkward category. When at a point where we're actually seeing a kind of a big upswing in the strength of engineers with armed turrets, especially in O12 with the Lambda, with the glue turret, which is considered one of the better turrets in the game. Uh, I'm afraid that essentially the Tinker really gets outshined by the true engineers, where this might not have been the case in N4, where those engineers didn't have turrets. I think, it really doesn't fit in. Yeah, it really doesn't fit in anywhere because the Lambda or other engineers with, quite good skills, pop out in Vanilla, in Torchlight, in Starmada. I just don't think really there's a place for this guy. And it's awkward too, where if you say you had, a Flash Pulse and 4 spare points, I don't know if I would upgrade that Flashbot to a Tinker. They fill a similar but different role where the Tinker is kind of there to also patch stuff up, but, can't really do it consistently. Remotes tend to have a 50-50, with a Fizz 10 of getting Gizmo kitted back, which isn't great, but it's better than nothing. But, if you're just sort of picking up, the odd flash bot, one or two things there, I'm not entirely convinced. I mean, look, in Vanilla O12, it's nice where you don't have as many sort of cheerleader type models. Maybe this slips in as a cheerleader, but I don't think it really slips in more than that, really, which is a bit of a shame. It's a cool looking model. Um, but yeah, I just don't think this really fits in the wider picture. You'll see it as a cheerleader sometimes, but if you want an engineer that the Gizmo kit sort of brings, I would just bring an engineer with an armed turret like the Lambda or the Monstrucker. If you're wanting a specialist operative at a very cheap price, the Warcore at the moment is a specialist, but that sort of feels like cheating. Also, the Ment Agent. If you look at the Ment Agent, it's only 4 more points to get a Ment. I think, if you haven't already got your one Ment, maybe you just sort of upgrade to that. But yeah, I guess as a very cheap specialist, maybe it's got some legs. As a repeater, you'd probably just prefer to have the Flash Pulse. But yeah, weird little model. I mean, deactivators are quite good in this edition. Weird little model. I'm not sure where it's going to fit in, if it will fit in. My initial sort of feeling is that it's not really going to see wide play, as it doesn't have a niche that's valued or really succeed in any niches I can think of offhand. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining me for this emergency broadcast. It's been good. We'll have a video coming soon with the new ISS, doing a big look over them, and that should be quite fun. But until then, thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you soon. Bye bye.